Well, okay, here we go. Once upon a time.
Cruise Stories with Jonathan Woolf.
I did a TV movie with Linda Carter called
Still Watch? Was that the
Still Watch?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
I did research on it. I haven't seen it, but I read about it.
Are you on Jeopardy at any point?
No.
But yeah, so anyway, we a small unit when we shot in LA, we went off to Washington, D.C. to shoot. And there was just a very small group of us. So we're in the VIP lounge at LAX with Linda Carter, her husband, who's like this big noise Washington lawyer, and the director, Rod Holcomb, who was a personal friend of mine, and Angie Dickinson, just a few other people. And so, we all started talking as humans, and that continued with me and Angie all through the flight, and then riding the shuttle bus into our hotel in Georgetown all the way through. And she was such a delight. She was a lovely lady, and it's refreshing that, big name people like that can still be humans as well. And, I used to sort of be basically her companion / bodyguard. She wanted to go out shopping in Georgetown and stuff, and she can't walk around on her own, obviously. So I'd be the guy with her.
Oh,
and
cool.
Another movie.
She seems really cool.
You know that movie that I'm thinking of right now, right?
Let me see. Is it Grand Slam?
Bad Guys. Bad Guys. You were close.
Bad Guys has James Booth in it too, right?
It did.
Yeah.
You're eerie. I tell you, it is downright eerie. But it also had Ruth Buzzy in it.
Yes.
As a wild and crazy lady wrestler.
A bunch of wrestlers are in it too, because at the time it was a big wrestling movie at the time.
It was. And another Hananya Bear movie. And I had a lot of fun in that. I really, I hung out with the wrestlers and was sort of thrown around as a little, like a chew toy, if you will, in the ring. But Hananya's a pretty little guy, and I would run interference on him, hand holding in the ring and stuff. I got bloodied and bruised, but I ate it up. But Ruth Buzzy, again, we buddied up. We were jogging companions in the morning and stuff like that.
Oh, that's
which is kind of cool. She's a lovely lady, just a lovely person.
さんさんさんさん朝日さん、あなたのお熱をちょうだいな。
ほかほかと太陽の贈り物。
ラクラクライフの朝日ソーラーピカ。
Japanese commercials you frequently did, you had no idea what they were about or what the product was even. So my feelings had been hurt because a DP who I'd done, I think, 4 or 5 features with had contacted me and says, "Oh, I won't be calling you for a while because I've just got a call to go to Hungary and do a TV movie. And they tell me the crews are excellent. And so the producer says, I can't take anybody, goodbye." So, which is really what a freelancer does not want to hear, because, you get into a groove with one team, and you think the income's going to go on forever, and then it suddenly doesn't. And now you haven't worked for anybody else for weeks or months. So that was bad news. So anyway, I was on this Japanese commercial. I was on an insert car in Pasadena. And we all had our fingers crossed, hoping that the dog would not fall off the Vespa scooter that we were shooting. We had a guy riding a Vespa, and there was a little dog on the back seat with his paws up on the guy's shoulders, and we're driving alongside shooting it. At this dates it somewhat. My pager went off, and my hands and my brain were a bit too busy to really look, but I did glance down. And I noticed it was a really strange phone number on the pager, which had a digital readout. So we broke for lunch, and I went to a payphone, and I dialed the number in and put in a vast amount of money, because it turned out that number was a hotel in Budapest, and it was my DP calling, screaming, hysterical, "You've got to get on a plane. You've got to come over here right now. Everything is terrible here. You've got to come. You've got to come. You've got to be on a plane tomorrow." And it was like, I don't gotta do anything. and by the way, thanks for forgetting all about me, and now you're pleading. So apparently he got there. The crew were, at that point, Hungary was still very much under the Russian boot heel, and the crew had been supplied by the state film studio, and they were not happy campers. And if the grips there needed to set a flag, for example, in front of a light, they would take a piece of black plywood and nail it to the wall in front of the light. And yeah, that was not quite what my DP was used to. They gave him somebody and said, "This is your dolly grip." So this guy it turned out had never seen a camera dolly before. First rehearsal take, he pushed the dolly off the end of the track, nearly taking the DP's eye out, because days of film, you know, you put your eye right up to the camera. So if it bounces off the track, you know, it's bad. So anyway, so that's what inspired him to make, after they patched him up, he got on the phone and panic-stricken called me. At that point, my personal life was very complicated. My then wife was extremely ill, and I had a son, and it was like, why am I suddenly going to go to Hungary for 6 weeks? Because people are panic-stricken when they've deserted me the week before, you know? Anyway, so backwards and forwards, phone calls with first the DP, then with the producer. And each time they said, "You've got to come," I was mentally adding $500 a week to my rate. And I had a family meeting, and it was determined that it would be okay for me to go to Hungary. So the very next day, I was on a plane to Hungary, and my first mission on arriving there was to be a troubleshooter. And by this time, the crew, such as it was, were grumpy and were rebellious and not wanting to do anything. They were like, it was a definite non-smoking set, so they'd walk around the set blowing cigarette smokes in people's faces. They would pretend not to understand things that they obviously did, So it turned out on arrival that, you know, the first thing I did was to nose around and to find out what the issues were, what the problems were, and why it wasn't running smoothly. And it turned out they were salaried employees of the film state studio who were earning about $2 a day US, and we used to working an 8-hour day. And if it took 6 months to make a movie, that was okay. So here comes this American film crew saying, "Well, hi guys, we're going to work 6 days a week, probably 16 hours a day, and you're going to have to work like hell, and you're not going to get any more money." So, you know, it was kind of lost in the translation totally. So I had to be Mr. Motivator and get the crew working. The gaffer on the show was a very powerful person. He was the Communist Party representative at the studio, and he had total control over hiring and firing, and he'd been overridden to get me there. So, you know, I was not a welcome person on the set, shall we say, with him. So it was complicated. It was very complicated. And the first thing I did was to look at the tools the guys had. And, you know, they were sharing, like, you know, one screwdriver and a broken hammer and a tired old staple gun. So I got production on the phone immediately back to LA to send a PA to Sears and buy a couple $100 worth of hand tools and put them on the next plane. And I stood there, and it was like Christmas. I was, you know, handing out hand tools to these guys, and you know, started to win them over that way. The other thing was craft service was kind of interesting. You'd arrive on the set at 7 in the morning, and there was this little caravan set up there, but as well as coffee and water and tea and stuff like that, there was brandy and slivovitz and you know, whatever you wanted to drink. So these guys would have their 7 o'clock shot of slivovitz and then go back and have seconds. So they were like, by 10 o'clock in the morning, they were all totally in the bag. So yeah, it was kind of a challenging shoot.
Is this Lena and My 100 Children?
Yes.
So you have all those children too to deal with, which is a lot of children.
That was another factor. I mean, what we did, and this leads to an interesting story. What production did was, we had to cast children en masse. And this was based on a true story of a whole bunch of kids who were practically feral being discovered by members of the Jewish community in Poland right after World War II. And these kids were either escapees from concentration camps or abandoned children, or their parents had been killed in the camps and stuff. They were all Jewish children. And because they were, even though the war was over, the Polish government, as it was then, had said, well, we don't need to do anything with them because they're Jewish. So this one person inspired a lot of following in the Jewish community to force the government to look after these kids. So anyway, the kids were dressed in rags, largely. So where do you find 50, 60, 70 children who are dressed in rags? So what they did was to basically cast the occupants of two orphanages who were actually treated very well. They really were. And they wore modern kids' clothes, and they were clean and they're healthy and so on. But we had to put them in wardrobe, of course, and they didn't look so great, but that was okay. So the very, very strong bonds developed between these kids and a film crew. It was like, people had come from outer space, that it was totally outside of their experience. So towards the end of the shoot, a few of us got together and went, what can we do to be remembered and to help these kids? You can't say, okay, we're going to choose one of you and take you to Disneyland, because that's one kid out of all of them and so on. So the sound recordist, Mark Ulano, came up with this great idea that one of the teachers at the orphanage was musically inclined. Why don't we get them a piano, and the kids can learn music, and not only it'll be there for these kids, but for generations to come. That'll set a precedent, and the kids will be involved in the arts somewhat. And it was a great idea. And so it sounds so simple, right? Except it turns out that for reasons that we never did find out, it was totally illegal to buy and sell a piano in Hungary at that point. And when you're a visitor to the country, you don't speak the language, and the whole place is under the control of a communist government, and the local people are not happy either. It's really difficult to find out. So there was a whole episode of covertly purchasing a used piano and smuggling it. It's not like something you can put under your coat and walk in, it's not like a harmonica. But we had to smuggle it in under cover of darkness and all this stuff. And all the time while we were there, 24/7, we were being followed, we were being watched. There were hidden cameras all through the hotels we were in. There were spies on the set, all this. So, piano smuggling was kind of challenging, but it happened. It did. And hopefully still to this day, that piano is there, doing good things for orphans.
That's really interesting that the majority of the children were real orphans, because the movie's about orphans. So
correct.
That's actually very interesting. I thought a lot of the children, I'm assuming the main kids that are acting in it are actors, right? But they were very
Yes.
good. I mean, usually I'm very critical of a lot of children actors, because you can see them waiting for their cues, or sometimes you see their mouths moving because they're like mimicking, waiting for their line. But all the children in it were really good, I thought.
One of them still is a very good friend of mine who played the lead gal. She's Canadian, as were most of the actors who weren't Hungarian. And she is still kind of a well-known actress in Canada. But she was then 15 while we were shooting. But yeah, she did good work. And they all did. And the lead who played Lena was Linda
Lavin. Linda Lavin.
Thank
from
you.
Alice, TV's Alice. I grew up watching Alice, actually. Watched, Mel's Diner, all that stuff. So
yes, and she was, what a wonderful, sweet person, and very genuine, and just lovely person, and a great trooper. And we had a very mixed crew. There was yours truly from New Zealand / Hollywood at that point. There was a Dutch English DP, also now a Hollywood guy. There was
Is that Eric Van Haren Norman?
Eric Van Haren Scarum. That's the guy. Yes.
I noticed you worked with them the same year in A Special Friendship too. I thought that was interesting as well.
That is stunning that you know that. But yes, I also did another one, Dreams of Gold, we shot in the Virgin Islands.
The Lena and her 100 children, I wasn't really aware of the story or the film until I talked to you about it. It was very powerful, very good TV movie. I mean, I thought it was really good, a really interesting story too. She has that survivor's guilt because like her sister and her were split up and she pretended to be Catholic and bleached her hair and stuff. So she feels guilty. There's like a faction in the group of the kids because some of the kids pretended like they were Catholics, so they're considered traitors and they're beating up those kids, and like she feels shame about that, which I thought was really interesting because I never really thought about, you know, the people that had to pretend like they were, you know, Christian. I thought that was an interesting kind of part of the story, and I thought that, like, you know, for a TV movie, it was really well done. I was impressed by it, and how the kids have to take up arms to fight, you know, I mean, it's just really disturbing too. You know, you have the town folk coming in wanting to kill all these poor Jewish kids, and then they have to take up arms to fight them. There was I'm paraphrasing, but she says at one point to, I think, one of the boys, like, you'll understand when you're older. And he says, he's like 15, and he says, I've killed 14 Germans to get here. How much older do I have to be to understand?
Oh,
you know, which I thought was a powerful line. And like, it was really good. I'm glad you turned me onto it because it was interesting.
Yeah, it was, you know, personally very close to my own personal history because my family heritage is very strongly Jewish, and a lot of my family were killed in the Second World War as a direct result. And the thing of pretending to be Catholic goes back to the Spanish Inquisition, 15th century, where, you know, you were tortured and you either said you were Catholic or you were killed. So it was kind of a reprise of that. So yeah, so being involved in a production of that, you know, there's frequently when you get into doing a long form film production, your location life and making of the film and the script of the movie kind of blur. You live, you know, like a screenplay. You sort of roll out of bed in the morning and read your lines for the day as what you're going to be doing, because there's very little difference between the life you're living, which is not normal because you're not at home in your own bed living your routine. You're in some exotic or non-exotic place, and there are actors and performers doing things all around you. So as I say, the lines blur. I think this is a pretty common thing for a lot of people. So to have all the discussion of open anti-Semitism and a lot of children around and stuff, you know, I was not at all unhappy to leave Hungary at that point. It was a pretty miserable place, and being followed and being aware of hidden cameras and stuff like that, even in some hotel rooms. One occasion I recall where one of the local crew, obviously he wanted to have a conversation with me. He was like looking over his shoulder all the time before he came, and he said, let's meet for coffee at this place. And we went there, and it was maybe half full, and we met up, sat at the table, and he started talking about what it was like working there with, you know, the Communist Party breathing down your neck. And suddenly 2 people walked in who I'd seen on the set before, and they walked in and looked around. He turned white, and he stopped talking and said, I gotta go, and left. Boom, you know. And it was, you know, you had that feeling all the time. You weren't sure who on the crew was trustworthy, or, you know, you could confide in to say anything. And I guess, you know, if you live that way, it kind of tweaks your whole lifestyle. we had, I mean, the merry group was Eric on camera, as we said. The camera assistant was German, Achim Schaefer, incredibly talented guy, and shooting a lot of low light stuff with very, very little depth of field. There was one scene, for example, shooting Lena lighting the candles, and we were doing a slow tracking move along it, and it was like almost entirely just lit by candles, which, you know, you digital babies wouldn't understand how difficult that can be, of course. But with film, you know, when you're shooting at like probably a 1.8 or something, you know, really close, to maintain focus on a tracking move, which was on planks, not on steel track for some reason. I forget why, but there was a reason. And he'd be black with sweat at the end of the shot. And, you know, we more than once had the conversation, you know what, you're so great, you could make it in Hollywood. You'd be one of, he said, that's my dream. I'd love to work in Hollywood, but I have this big problem. And I said, well, what's the big problem? He said, well, the lenses are all marked in meters. And I'm used to working in meters, so I wouldn't be able to read them if they were marked in feet. I said, you know what, that's really stupid. but anyway, so we had Achim there, and my best boy was Danish, and he had a fledgling rental company in Copenhagen, and he'd driven his 5-ton truck and generator across to Budapest, which you can do in Europe, you know, you can do that sort of thing. And I'm still in touch with him, and you know, he has a wonderful life. He's got a very big inventory of rental stuff, and he's currently in Greenland and shooting something. I don't know what it is, but yeah, Michael's really good. So we'd have these halting conversations. There'd be our driver, who was Hungarian, and there'd be me, who spoke English and no Danish or German, and there'd be the German guy who spoke, you know, and we'd all go off to work together. We're all buddies, and we'd go out partying at night and stuff, and somehow we managed to communicate. I'm not quite sure why, but even the Hungarians, I don't think, spoke Hungarian very well, and they always seemed to be disagreeing about, you know, things they were discussing, and using the wrong words to each other and stuff. Yeah, it was not a really happy shoot. And here's a moment for you. We were shooting some kids in a scene in a classroom in a real school, and we'd fabricated some soft lights to give it some pop light out of wood, cardboard, whatever, and put our own globes in them and stuff. And so we're shooting in this classroom with an actor as the teacher, and it's full of the real life school kids. And suddenly one of the lights caught fire. And there's like, I didn't know the Hungarian word for fire, you know. So to get the kids out of the room in an orderly fashion was really, really, you know, you can't panic, and you can't, you know, there weren't enough translators, but to get them out in an orderly fashion without turning them into crispy critters was like, yeah, very difficult. And you know, typical classroom with one door, and yeah, we managed, obviously, or you know, you would have read about this somewhere already. But yeah, it was, and oh yeah, we had also a similarly dangerous, a vintage World War II machine gun that we were shooting close-ups with, and they had nothing but live ammunition for it.
Oh my God.
Yes. So,
oh my God.
A creaky old machine shooting bullets at high speed with live rounds was again.
Well, that 15-year-old kid's shooting it at the end when they're fighting against all the people at the end. They have it mounted. It's like mounted, and he's like shooting it into the forest at the end.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
That was it.
Wow.
Wow, your memory is I mean, you saw Lena
I
recently.
did, yeah.
obviously.
After I talked to you,
Oh, okay.
I seeked it out and watched it. You brought up the lighting too, the candlelight. I thought about that when I was watching it. Usually with a TV movie, you don't get too many artistic shots, but there was one shot that I remember in the movie. They're talking about moving the children for the second time, trying to get them to Palestine. And she's standing in a window with the candlelight, and the moonlight's coming through the window and the candlelight's coming from the other side, and she's having a conversation with this woman, and one half of her face is lit with blue cool light and the other half of their faces are lit with the candlelight, the warm candlelight. And I remember watching it, and just because it's a TV movie, it just struck me. I was like, wow, this is a nice, beautifully lit, this is an artistic shot here, and you don't get that too often in a TV film. It's usually they cut, but I was impressed. It was well done.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah, we tried. And I mean, some of the equipment, apart from what Michael brought from Denmark, the equipment was like, Stone Age equipment.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And was horrible, unreliable, and so on. That happens because people go budget, and or what's available. And, that crops up all over the place. But, and you make do the best you can. Jumping off, another example for that was the picture I did in Brazil. The equipment was really, really bad. And
that Savage Harvest?
Yeah, Savage Harvest. The power, we were shooting in this remote, what had been a coffee plantation, and it was an abandoned house, which was the main location. A big old colonial mansion. There was no door-to-door power drop for it to run our lighting equipment. So they somehow come up with a power drop off the main line feeding the area from miles away. Ronnie Taylor, the DP, in the afternoons would sometimes, he'd screw up his eyes and look at the light and say, things are looking a trifle warm here, Dennis, to the gaffer. And Dennis would have to go and be driven to the nearest phone. And he had the number of the guy in the powerhouse in the dam where they generated electricity for the area, and he'd have to ask him to pour more water over the dam to get the volts up, to get the lights brighter.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's funny.
And that's it. You got to make do with that equipment. Wow. I did another TV movie on St. Croix, which was Virgin Islands. Dreams of Gold it was called. It was, again, as a lot of TV movies were, that was based on a true story of a guy who was a little bit of a hustler, Mel Fisher, who was a treasure hunter, old Spanish galleons and so on. And he was sure that there was a vast Spanish hoard of treasure in a certain location. And he kept looking for it. And of course, searching for gold at sea takes money, investment money. And he was a little bit of a scam artist raising money to get that. But he finally did. He found $150 million worth of Spanish gold or something. It's like the biggest ever. It was the Atocha was the ship. Anyway, so it was that story. The equipment, again, it was like, let's save some money on the equipment. And of course, there's no equipment per se on St. Croix. So it was brought across from a no longer in business rental company in Florida. And their attitude had seemed to be, well, these guys, they want to screw us for the tightest deal they can. So I know, we'll send them the lights that we've been using that are broken, that we normally prop open the dumpster with, and we'll send them the broken sandbags that have been propping doors open, and all. And it was like the cable, the distribution cable was like lethal. You could see bare copper in some spots on it. And a lot of this picture, which was shot on the water, we were shooting on this huge steel barge,
open wires, water, steel.
Exactly. And, so that was, it knocked a few people on their asses once or twice, to say the least. And I finally, because I had a rental business going back in LA, and I was like embarrassed for the industry of rental people. And I got the guy who owned the rental company to fly over. And I remember he says, so tell me, what's wrong with all this stuff, on the set? So I put an arm around his shoulders and I says, walk with me. We're going to walk and talk here. And we walked away. And I spent 10 minutes detailing exactly what was wrong. And he ended up in tears. And he went back to Miami, and he sent us some decent equipment.
That's good, at least.
So some of us survived.
Was it also called The Pilot? Was that around 1980? Or
that was a different Cliff Robertson picture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a pilot with a drinking problem in that one, I think.
Yeah, I guess the movie Flight with Denzel was inspired by that movie.
Yeah, come to think of it, you're absolutely right. Yeah. They should have "Don't Drink and Fly" bumper stickers, but I guess they didn't. But no, he was wonderful. We had I don't think that it was definitely a merry party shoot in St. Croix, apart from the proximity to cheap rum and ocean and all that. We discovered that the small hotel that some of us were staying in Frederickstad, that the two guys who owned the hotel, they'd close the house bar at about 11 o'clock. And they didn't live on the premises. They'd say, okay, time everybody. And they put these little wooden shutters up over the bottles of booze and usher everybody out. And then they'd go home. And we discovered, me and my friend Mikey, who was on the show, that they didn't lock the door. So by about 11:15 every night, the entire cast and crew would be back in the bar. And Mikey and I would be behind the bar, tending bar and pouring drinks, ganja going up and down the bar. And it got to the point where there were mornings when it was like we'd notice, oh no, it's almost dawn, we've got to be at work in 2 hours, and just like bartenders, we'd clean up the place and put the trash out and then go and take a shower and go straight on the set. I don't know how we survived, but we did. And so there was, it was marvelous nights with, the cast members sitting telling raunchy stories at the bar, and the crew and everybody. And it was all free.
That's even better.
The best kind of booze. So so it was kind of a merry shoot. Yeah, and the wonderful Loretta Swett, who was just marvelous, and many adventures. But yes, some of which I draw a veil over some of the adventures there that were a bit whatchamacallit. But yeah, it followed the thing. And Mel Fisher himself, the guy who the story was about, came to visit and spent a few days with us. And he was just this happy old drunk who was like worth, hundreds of millions of dollars. And he'd walk around with all these ancient Spanish gold jewelry around his neck and stuff. And typically a 23-year-old blonde on each arm. And happily drunk, walking around smiling. Why wouldn't he smile? I dressed up as Mel Fisher one day when we knew he was coming on the set, and I don't know if you are familiar with a grip item it's known as grip chain. It's a brass chain, and it was widely used before ratchet straps were a thing, to tie the stuff down real quick. It's actually a brilliant piece of hardware. It really is, and it's just a small fine chain, and it's brass. So I draped myself in a whole bunch of brass grip chain and grabbed a couple of the female members of the crew, one on each arm, and was there to meet Mel when he arrived on the set dressed in his Spanish jewelry. So, and he laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. It was a good moment. Movies that we typically had a 20-day shooting schedule, and by the second day you were 2 days behind. It was like, you were just constantly, they were all budgeted too low and compressed into too tight a time frame. And it was like, you just knew, it's like, get set, go. Okay, we're behind now.
You're being set up for failure right away, basically.
Right.
Basically, yeah.
The other thing I remember was my best boy. We shot all night on a stage, or almost all night in a studio somewhere, and I had my grip truck there, and I went home. I was exhausted, and it was like I went to bed, and 2 hours later my phone is ringing incessantly, and I wake up, and it's the guy who's driving my truck. He says, "Your truck won't run. It's stuck. It's in the middle of Venice Boulevard or somewhere." It was a major street. And I said, well, what's wrong with it? He says, I don't know. The motor runs, but I don't know what's wrong with it. It just won't go. And I got to go home and sleep. And I was like, oh man. Okay. So I got dressed. I called up my field truck repair guy and told him, and I said, I'll meet you over there, you know. And I drove over there. He was already there. And I drove, and like the traffic was backed up for, you know, a mile in every direction. And I got there, and I see my truck, and it's a big box truck. And I can see as I get close to it that the drive shaft is sitting on the road underneath it. And my driver hadn't figured that was out. That's what was wrong with it. It's like this huge, long length of steel lying on the ground.
Oh,
he went
man.
on. He's become one of Hollywood's great key grips now, that guy. But
wow.
back then he was a little bit
Rusty.
green.
Okay.
We're talking about made-for-TV movies. You did a movie called Samaritan, the Mitch Snyder story, like around '86,
Right.
with Martin Sheen and Roxanne Hart. It's a movie about, he's advocating for homeless vets in D.C. I was just curious if you had any stories about Martin Sheen, and he's obviously been in so many great roles.
Well, actually, come to think of it, he was a marvelous guy. And, you know, the TV movie I did with him, he played I can't remember what the guy's name was, but he fought with municipalities to give homeless people places to live.
Mitch Snyder.
Mitch Snyder, right.
Was the
And he was it? I think he might have been in DC or Chicago, somewhere back east.
Yeah, it was in DC.
It was DC. Okay, great. Yeah, and his thing was that there were all these big buildings that the feds owned that were not in use anymore, and they padlock and chain them, and there were people freezing to death on the street. So, and apparently Martin Sheen does this sort of thing. He really got into character, and he went and lived on the streets of LA downtown for several days and nights. He was like in character totally as a homeless person, and, you know, only ate in soup lines and all that sort of thing. And he was like, you know, he didn't stop at lunchtime and revert to being Martin Sheen. And we were shooting in the front of City Hall, downtown LA, I remember. And he and another actor were having a conversation sitting on the steps when we broke for lunch. And they were getting really loud, having a conversation about homeless and stuff. And he was really, really, you know, and a crowd started gathering. People go, oh, that's Martin Sheen. That's not a homeless person, you know. And they were talking away, and I sort of felt a bit embarrassed for them that, you know, guys, why don't you know, take this offline, you know. I mean, we didn't have online then, but had we had it, it would have been an appropriate thing to say. So I sort of went up and sort of came up behind him and sort of just quietly whispered to him, you know, you're drawing a crowd with your loud conversation here, and, you know, do you want to just, you know, quietly walk away, or, you know, whatever. And he turned around and he ripped my head off. He went, this homeless crisis is terrible, and all these people, and we've got to, you know, promote it, and we've got to talk about this, and here we are, we've got nowhere to live. And he just went on, and the crowd, of course, grew bigger and bigger and bigger. And I went, okay, I'll just go and eat lunch now. Left him to it. But he was lovely, super professional, kind, nice guy.
We're delighted to welcome Mr. Martin Sheen. You have heard some of his great credits, and Martin Sheen, we're delighted to have you in Good Day, along with you, Mr. Mitch Snyder, a member of the Community for Creative Nonviolence. And I want to point out to everybody that I gather that the two of you met when you, Martin Sheen, portrayed Mitch Snyder in the movie The Samaritans, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And does that launch your interest, Martin Sheen, in the plight of the homeless, or were you there even before that?
No, I must confess I was not actively there before that, but you can't be around this energy next to me and not get involved.
What is it about the homeless that grabs you, Martin? Why this particular cause?
Well, it's really indicative of what's going on in the whole country with social justice. There's so little of it. And that is kind of like the first step. I don't think you can separate any issue in social justice issues, whether they're the arms race or Central America, AIDS, apartheid, homelessness. They all are cut from the same cloth, and it's a seamless cloth. If you want peace, you must work for social justice. So you start with what's at your front door, the homeless.
Mitch Snyder, let me bring you in right away. Interesting life. A world of Madison Avenue, you switch and now live in a shelter in Washington, D.C. Is that correct?
Actually, for the last 3.5 months, I've been living on the street, around the Capitol, in an effort to focus attention on the issue and to get Congress to pass legislation, which, in fact, is scheduled to be voted on today by the House.
Tell me, both of you, what is the homeless person? Who is the homeless person? There are myths abounding about who they are. Are they men? Are they women? Are they alcoholics? Are they single women? Are they married women with children? Who are they? Where do we find them? And do we have the problem in Boston? Presumably we do. That's why you're here.
Well, there are not myths. There's defense mechanisms and there's reality. The reality is that homeless people are everyone. They're you. I know reporters who live on the street who have in previous years interviewed us and written stories for major newspapers and are now, in one case, living in a women's shelter, in another case, living in an abandoned building. The defense mechanism is that in some way they are different than you and I, so that we're protected from that possibility. In our guts, we understand that, in fact, they are you and I. They are middle-class people, they're old people, they're poor people, they're young people. You find every walk of life, every color, every age, every size represented on the street. What all those folks share in common is only one thing, and that is that at some point in time, they needed help desperately because of some either temporary or permanent disability, economic, mental, physical. Something happened that caused them to need help and they didn't get it.
Martin, I would be curious to know, were you part of the demonstration the other night in Washington where lots of people stayed up all night, slept outside, including Congressman Joseph Kennedy and his wife?
Yeah.
What was that like for you,
Well,
to be homeless for that night? In a sense?
Yeah, well, mind you, it's not possible to assimilate the real living in the streets life because I have a credit card in my pocket. I know I can go to a hotel.
Yeah.
I'm in a hotel now for tonight. So I can't possibly comprehend what it's like. But I would suggest to anyone that is interested in helping the homeless to begin there, to go and spend the night in the street with the people. And if you make it through the night and you wake up the next morning, you start to get some idea of what it's like and what you should do about it.